Tanse, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lisa Baroldi. I'm the director and vision holder of Progress Unlimited Consulting. It is an honor to present today in Treaty 6 territory in the presence of our elders, whom I hope to meet later, Chief Morin, other dignitaries, all of you, and of course with my fellow co-presenters here, Bent Arrow Traditional Healing Society Executive Director Cheryl Whiskey Jack in stripes, Boyle Street Community Services Executive Director Julian Daly, that's pretty evident who that is, and Town Aboriginal Welcome Service Supervisor Karen Mind in brown. Today, the four of us, as Rick mentioned, are introducing what we consider a bold idea for an Aboriginal quarter in Edmonton. The idea stems partly from tons of conversations we've been having over the years, conversations with partners, community members, political leaders, entrepreneurs, architects, journalists, designers, and so many others. The idea also comes from the work that we do on a collaborative initiative called the Town Aboriginal Welcome Service. Bent Arrow, Boyle Street, and Boyle Street Aboriginal Services are partners in this 3-year pilot project, which we hope to make a sustainable, permanent fixture in Edmonton by 2014. For those of you who don't know, the Town Aboriginal Welcome Service is a one-stop shop for Aboriginal people transitioning from rural communities and from corrections to Edmonton. To give you a better sense of what Town is all about, we'd like to show you a short video of some recent interviews that we've done with our clients and other people who have experienced transition to Edmonton.
Some people are stronger than others, it seems like, there would be other people that I'd be friends with that came to the city, and if they experienced the same thing I did, they wouldn't be able to handle it. And a lot of them haven't been able to handle it, so they move back to the community. But then there's others who, they don't know how to live in the city. They don't, know how to find a place, how to find a job, how to find a school, how to get around the city.
I'm kind of like the shy person, so I kind of keep to myself because I can't really trust anyone. So, yeah.
We went to many different places to rent, and as soon as they found out how many people we have, they're like, no, straight out.
Yeah, or they'd make excuses. I think the best excuse I heard was they had one for us. They were like, yes, we have a house, we can be set up and stuff. And, how many adults? And we were like, I was 2. They're like, how many kids? 7. Oh, well, I think there's not enough bathrooms free. You're gonna need more bathrooms. I don't think this is gonna be a good fit for you.
There's a really unique culture here for Aboriginal people. And I think it's just finding that connectedness is sometimes, it is difficult in a city like Edmonton where the culture isn't really embraced. You don't see it. You don't, you're within the city, but you don't recognize your culture anywhere. Even though we have, one of the higher Aboriginal populations, because you don't see your culture here, you don't feel like you fit. The Town program would have been really helpful for me when I moved here, and I think it would be helpful to anyone who's coming here to have that feeling of immediate connectedness and not something that you build up over time.
When you told me about Town and stuff like that, I was like, wow, that's what we need as an Aboriginal people, is being able to have something that is that in between, because when people come from the reserves or come from a small town and they move to the city, it's like they're so overwhelmed. I have friends, family, just it's like right away they go running back, or they never felt like they've had that option to be able to receive help, to learn how to live in the city. They don't see the opportunities that they have.
When I moved here, I didn't know anything. I didn't even know what a Medi-Center was. I mean, where I come from, we had one clinic. There's a standard process, you phone, make an appointment. Here you can just walk in. Like a Medi-Center, what's a Medi-Center? Didn't know how to ride the bus. I don't think I even took a taxi before I came here. Those types of things. So just those basic things, finding an apartment, getting your services connected, all new experiences for me.
I'd have to say all the different things they have under one roof and how they come to your place and they make the time to get to know you, and even if they don't come, they text us all the time, and just makes me feel more comfortable with them. Like some places I've went to, they just get like a cold shoulder and just have this attitude, oh, you need this, you need that. With them, they'll be like, ask us questions on what we need and stuff.
You walk into a service like New in Town, you see, Aboriginal faces, and they're there to help you to do those basic things.
I called Cheryl, so she's like a big help to me. And she's still helping me.
It was good though, because our first bus ride was really good.
Yeah.
Like just sitting there with her and like making her comfortable and telling her what to do, to put the ticket in and get your transfer, how long it lasts and whatever. So it was really good.
Susie phones us on a regular basis to let us know what's going on around the community, and if it's close to us, we'll go. And they referred us to quite a few places too, so we weren't feeling so alone being.
They all come together, and every time we come here, and if one doesn't have an answer, the other one's there, and they're,
I think having this support here is essential for a lot of those people who may tend to, if they've had one too many doors closed in their face, would give up. And I think by having this support here would really help them to move forward.
Like without New in Town, we'd have no idea where to start, but we've come a long ways with New in Town, and they're godsend.
Edmonton, as Councillor Iveson said, does have the second largest urban Aboriginal population in Canada. And we think this is fantastic, that this is an asset, and that our cityscape needs to and can reflect this in a meaningful, positive, and useful way. So what do we mean by an Aboriginal quarter? We're not talking about an urban reserve. We're not proposing a cultural center or museum or a tourist hotspot, although the quarter could include all of these and be connected to other ideas out there. And I know there are many other ideas about how to incorporate Indigenous design and culture into the city. What we're talking about is a business revitalization zone, a cultural hub, a place where architecture, art, design, business, services, cultures, and generations intersect. A place that instills pride and changes perceptions. A place where people from all backgrounds feel welcome. Think Little Italy, Chinatown, Edmonton's new French Quarter. We all go to these areas, we enjoy them, we shop, we eat, and most importantly, we experience the success stories of these cultural communities. Another important note is that during our talk, images will scroll. Some of these are images of Boyle Street, Bentaro, New in Town, Edmonton. Others are of buildings, signs, and urban design in other Canadian cities that inspire us, and we hope will inspire you too. Again, we do not profess to have all of the answers, but we do have some ideas, experience, stories about sustainability, which is why we're all here. So without further ado, I'm going to put on my Oprah hat and pick these brilliant minds on stage, and I encourage you to do so at some point during this conference or afterwards as well. One of the comments that was made in the video by Angela Carafel was that when she moved to Edmonton, she felt like she didn't see herself in the city. And oftentimes we hear Aboriginal people say, we just don't see ourselves. What does this mean in your experiences?
I think the first thing that struck me one of the first things that struck me when I moved to Edmonton myself was the invisibility of the Aboriginal community here. And I remember talking to my partner saying, "What? How come we don't see Aboriginal folk in shops, working in shops, in positions of leadership, in our media?" The portrayals that we saw were largely negative, if they existed at all, and that's kind of very striking. So that was a very sort of personal experience. The other personal experiences that strikes me is when you come into Edmonton by air and you come into Vancouver by air. When you arrive in Vancouver airport, you're in no doubt that you're coming into a place that has a long history of Indigenous population. The first thing you see are those amazing carvings and statues and other things which say very powerfully that this is Indigenous land you're coming into. When you come into our airport, Edmonton, I just came in a few weeks ago to the new part as well. There's nothing that I could see that suggests to you in any vivid way that you're coming into a place that has had Indigenous population for 10,000 years. So I think in some very kind of ways like that, we make our Aboriginal history invisible. Our names and our streets, our parks, I can't think of hardly any that have got Aboriginal. Oh, there it goes. That was good timing. We've got some councillors here. We don't have any parks or anything named after Indigenous peoples. And in fact, what's interesting, we do have parks named after people who exploited our Indigenous people. For example, we have a whole area, Oliver, and parks named after Frank Oliver, who's a very controversial person in the history of our city, and who, we speak to many Aboriginal people, will talk about how he exploited Aboriginal people, and there has a sorry part in their history, and yet we honour him, but we don't honour our Indigenous people. And then to somewhere like Boyle Street, where I work, and seeing that invisibility continuing, where our folk don't see themselves anywhere and are often not welcome in a lot of parts of our city as well. That's another kind of part of it. The invisibility is what happens to Aboriginal people in our city. Almost like just take a minute, because I think it's important. There's almost what I call a virtual apartheid in our city that we have. It's not, and it's more insidious than apartheid in South Africa, because at least that was legislated, something you could fight against. So the stories I hear, and one was picked up here, a guy trying to get housing, not being able to get it. We just a few months ago, one of our staff took an Aboriginal couple to be housed, and the landlord took one look at the couple. It was all arranged, everything was set up on the phone. Took one look and said, "Oh, I don't house people like you," and that was in 2012. And the landlord felt that was all right to say something like that. We see people going for job interviews, trying to get jobs and being turned away, being the public space where in our parks and in quasi-public spaces like malls, folk being moved out of it, moved on, largely Aboriginal folk. So even in the public space, that has contracted. There's very few places, I would certainly say, homeless or street-involved Aboriginal people, which is the largest percentage of the street-involved and homeless population are Aboriginal. So very few places they can go without being moved on. They're safe places to be. So that makes them invisible too, because other members of the public, non-Aboriginal members of the public, have very few opportunities to interact because those folk are not even present in the spaces they might be going into. So those are some of the things that have struck me here, personally and professionally.
It was a very spirited conversation we had when we came together as two organizations to do New in Town, to offer this service in the city of Edmonton. And we had conversations like the ones Julian just spoke about. We talked about going to Calgary and how any road you drive on in Calgary, virtually, all you have to do is look up and know that you're in someone's traditional territory. And we just don't get that. I heard a comedian in Edmonton who was actually from the United States who talked about his first impressions of Edmonton when he came. And he knows that this land is traditional Cree territory, and he wanted to know where were they? And he says you have White Avenue, you have the Yellowhead. He's a comedian, so he was making jokes, but it sort of struck me when he said that he's right. We look around and we just don't see that presence. we've been invited as organizations to a number of consultations in the communities where space is being designed, buildings are being designed, and they're sort of public places. And in our experience, when we talk about the Aboriginal community being represented in design, it's either not even considered or it's an afterthought. And so we've been to consultations where they'll say, well, what if we did something like this? Would that make you happy? And it's not about making us happy. It's just about really recognizing that, you know, that we have been here for thousands and thousands of years. And I was really struck by the people who come to Newtown who also say that, you know, they come here and they don't see themselves in this city, and I think that speaks volumes.
Toronto has a Native Child and Family Services building that is right downtown. It has a rooftop sweat. It's a really spectacular architectural gem in the center of the city. Vancouver has the Scotchway Healing Center, which you'll hear about later, and we thought maybe Edmonton should have a building like that. And then through Newtown, we were realizing that when people come here, they start asking questions like, where can I go to get connected to culture and community? So Karen, what are some of your experiences when people get to Edmonton from First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities, or from corrections? How do they feel, and what are they looking for? What kinds of services, and where are you directing them?
Generally, when we do see people coming through our doors, the first thing we want to do is welcome them. We want to ensure they feel welcome, that they feel there is someone who can relate to their story, relate to where they've come from, and relate to their experiences. Because that's the first thing they'll tell us is, I feel so lost, I'm not connected to anything, I don't recognize, I don't know how to get around. Where is the Aboriginal community? And it's, I mean, I could point to another service organization down the road, but there is no hub. So that's what they're looking for. That's that feeling of connectedness, of being welcomed. I think overall, I would say at least 80% of the people that come through the door, it's that isolation. That's the key. That's what they say is their biggest barrier. It's the isolation, not having that sense of home, the community not embracing individuals.
Another thing that that we noticed with the people that were coming in to receive services from Newtown is that you know, they have had a number of doors not necessarily slammed in their face or closed in their face, but an assumption made out there that because they're from here that they ought to know how to do these things. But when you move from rural to urban, a lot of the experiences you have when you come into the city are very brand new experiences. How to hook up utilities is something that they've never ever had to do, and you know, registering kids in school can be a really intimidating process. So there's an assumption made by people in the community, even other helping organizations, that, you know, what's the big deal? And we sort of take nothing for granted with our families that come in the door, that whatever it is that they're looking to find, they obviously don't have the answer because they're looking for these support services. And largely, the people that we see walking through our doors are coming here hoping for better things. They're coming here for education, they're coming here for employment, they're coming here to make their lives better. And you know, when they have negative or discouraging experiences, it makes that pursuit a difficult one for them.
I think that is a very common experience, that negative experience, and doors being shut, and it can allow people can very easily end up quite vulnerable. What we see at Boyle Street is people, like Cheryl describes, coming with full of hopes and dreams in Edmonton and feeling they can better their lives here. And then coming and finding that that's really not their experience, and it is almost like moving to another country. And always we often talk about what we're doing in Newtown, like settlement services, the experiences that some, at least, if not many, rural Aboriginal folk have when they arrive in Edmonton. It is like moving to another country, and very similar to some of the experiences that immigrants have coming here, and similar barriers too. And because that dream is shattered for some, and they find more barriers than they ever anticipated, and a level of racism too. I mean, I think that's got to be said. You know, I've talked to some folk at Boyle Street who've moved from rural communities and saying, well, it was really tough on reserve, and I didn't see opportunities for myself and my kids, so that's why I came to Edmonton. And then I come to Edmonton, and yeah, there's more opportunities for me and my kids, but I find doors shut in my face. I find a racism that I didn't get on reserve. So it's kind of like the choice is pretty bleak for some. And when people find themselves in that situation, often can become quite vulnerable, and what we see that people do prey on folk moving from rural communities, especially young Aboriginal folk. There are those that know that they're new to Edmonton and know that maybe their money's going to run out quickly or has run out already, and that they are at that point very vulnerable, and engage them seek to engage them in drug trade and sex trade at the most extreme. But often folk are drawn into lifestyles and ways of being that aren't really that healthy for them and weren't part of the dream when they arrived in Edmonton. That's part of what we're trying to do as well, is to prevent that happening and to provide a better, healthier alternative than going down that other road, which can seem quite attractive when you're feeling isolated, desperate, kind of unappreciated, and your dreams kind of crumbling a bit, that someone offers you what seems like maybe an attractive, glamorous way out of that, and it's not at all, but it's there.
I think amongst the community organizations in Edmonton and area as well, that there is a lot of really engaging organizations that have a lot of people from the Aboriginal community who are really connected. It's just making that connection that becomes so important. And once we get families who do get connected to either one of our organizations or organizations that are out there, that's all it takes. And there is a really strong fabric of community in this city. I'm not from here either. I'm from the East, and I make this my home. I love this city, and I'm very invested in seeing that it become, a place for everybody.
How would an Aboriginal quarter help people transitioning to Edmonton and maybe change perceptions so there is reduced racism, or just bring people together in a more vibrant space? How could that happen, and what would that look like?
I think it's an opportunity to bring the community together, and I'm talking about people from the Aboriginal community and the larger community, to come together and put some good energy into seeing where this would go. I think, like I said earlier, that there is a strong fabric of community in this city. I think it's one of the things that I like about this city, and so I think there's an opportunity for that energy to come together.
I would agree with that. I think there's an opportunity for education too about the massive contribution that Indigenous folk have made to all of our lives, especially those of us who are non-Aboriginal. Really, so much of what we look around and have created in this city is because of the land we're on, the land that the Indigenous people shared with us, and I think there's very little understanding of that, very little recognition of that. Even if you talk to some of the non-Aboriginal folk whose family have been here for a while, 100 years or so, they often tell you stories about how their ancestors, when they first settled in Alberta, and especially in the winters, only survived because the Aboriginal people helped them survive, and they would not have lived literally without that assistance. Yet that's all forgotten and has been replaced by these terrible, insidious, negative stereotypes about Aboriginal people as people who only take and from the city and give nothing, and it's just it's an abhorrent mythology and stereotype that needs to be challenged. So that would be a good opportunity. I think in some ways we already have an Aboriginal quarter, I would argue, in that the inner city broadly is certainly an area where you see a high concentration of Aboriginal people in our city, a place where many feel comfortable and can connect and have a sense of community that Cheryl talked to. And maybe there's a place for recognizing that. And it's interesting, as our inner city is being developed and our downtown's being developed, I think there's moves in some quarters at least to move on that community, because I think there are some, and they won't say it necessarily very publicly, but I know it's being said behind the scenes in some quarters, who see that community shouldn't be, or don't see a place for it in the new downtown of Edmonton, the new inner city of Edmonton, and would like it moved. And they don't say it's necessarily because it's Aboriginal, but when you see that people say they want to move a community on, and the majority of that community is Aboriginal, well, it's hard not to come to some conclusions about that. So I think it's a great opportunity, Lisa, to talk about the richness that community brings currently and recognize it, and maybe put some sort of structure around it and validate it and celebrate it, rather than it being seeing something to be moved away, but something that we want to embrace.
One thing I know that I'm encountering in the work that I do is a number of Aboriginal entrepreneurs who are looking for spaces to provide their services or their products. And so, if there is a zone where you can merge business and art and culture and services and all kinds of things, then and have somebody at the helm who's really making sure that neighborhood is running smoothly, as we do with other business revitalization zones, then maybe it could be a fixture in the city that people gravitate to.
I know we just recently moved into a closed community school in the city of Edmonton, and our experience with moving in there has really largely in the last year been about educating our community, our surrounding community. We're now in the community of Parkdale, and we've had to really educate that community in what it is that our organization does and who we serve and how we serve them. There was fear attached to an organization like ours coming into their community, all because there's the word healing in our name, Bentaro Traditional Healing Society. There was an impression that people were coming there to perhaps get treatment for drug and alcohol addiction, and we'd have people sort of altered or inebriated in some way walking through their communities to get to this place where Bentaro was. And we've had to really educate them on what it is we're there to do, and we've made some really good strides in doing that.
I think if anything, an Aboriginal hub quarter would bring and instill that sense of pride that's lost when an individual comes to Edmonton and they don't have that connectiveness, they don't have that support there to help them through what it is they've come here to do. They might be here for a short time. They might be coming to Edmonton to make this their permanent home, but they can't call it a home unless there's that connectiveness. That Aboriginal quarter would do that. It would bring that sense of pride out. It would provide an opportunity for non-Aboriginal people to learn truly who we are and the beautiful things we bring.